We found notebooks at Goodwill's. Tobias, the Quig, and the Rumplenut Tree. Written and illustrated by Tim Robinson. Whoa, Rumplenut trees. Tobias, the Quig, and the Rumplenut Tree. This is their story, the story of three. The story of three who depend upon one another forever, forever, and on. The Quig was a bird with fabulous plumes, the kind kept by people in cages and rooms, for the pleasure of those who might never have seen a Quig in the wild, where he'd rather have been. Now the Quig was enthroned in a glorious cage, gilded and gleaming at just center stage, in a parlor surrounded by treasures procured from mysterious places his owners had toured. They brought something back from wherever they went to make sure that the fabulous Quig was content. And yes, he was grateful for being adored, but something outside just could not be ignored. For beyond a large window and up in a rise grew a Rumplenut tree right in front of his eyes. Now a Rumplenut tree to a Quig is a home, in the wild where they live in a group not alone, with his branches all twisted around and around and Rumplenuts spread out all over the ground. This beacon, this vision from where he was born, put the Quig in a quandary, divided and torn. He knew as a pet this is where he should be, but his heart and his soul both longed to be free. And so the Quig dreamed of the Rumplenut tree. Now the Rumplenut tree was himself in a rut. The trees that were once by his side had been cut. On the rise he stood sadly, all but alone, except for some stumps and a wall made of stone. Solitude though, was just half of the thing. See, the Rumplenut tree needed someone with wings and instinct to know just where a Rumplenut's likely to grow. For right now the Rumplenuts fell in the shade that the Rumplenut foliage made. Ample and lush, so green and verdurted, so thick that the light from the sun was obscured. In the wild, on the island where Rumplenuts grow, Quigs do the work of a farmer. They sow. They carry the nuts in their beaks from the shade to the places where young trees from old nuts are made. But here on the rise there were no Quigs at all to carry the nuts from the shade past the wall. It seemed a solution might never be found, and new trees might never break through the ground. It needed the Quig, and the Quig wanted out, and they each needed someone to bring it about. And so to Tobias to figure it out. Tobias! Tobias, being the gardener's boy, preferred things with leaves to playing with toys. Flowers and shrubberies, cabbage and peas, but mostly Tobias liked climbing in trees. Oh, looky. Sycamores, birches, alders, and elms, he saw them as ships with himself at their helms. He imagined spectacular, glorious feats, commanding a vast and notorious fleet. The pride of them all, the most noble to see, was the ship that he saw in the Rumplenut tree. He climbed on its branches and sheltered his eyes to scan the horizon for pirates and spies. He would look to the left and then to the right, steer close to the wind, and outrun the night. On one such excursion he spotted a bird who stared from a cage toward a place it preferred. He followed its eyes to the Rumplenut tree, and he knew then and there what his mission would be. He must free this bird, this glorious thing. He would open its cage and let it take wing. But the window was high and Tobias was small. He wasn't too sure he could reach it at all. And so to the plan and the stilts and the fall. Tobias recalled somewhere deep in the shed, way out in the back of the vegetable bed, were some long scraps of wood, a hammer and nails, so he tossed up the anchor and quick fluffed the sails. He jumped from the tree, and after 2 tries, he vaulted the wall and ran down the rise. He sprinted the property, charged through the shed, and set to the purpose alive in his head. After some clanging and banging around, he emerged from the shed, 2 more feet off the ground. Tall enough now on the stilts he had made, Tobias set out to accomplish his raid. He stilted his way to the window that faced the Rumplenut tree, and he carefully placed his face to the glass to size up the task and to ask one question he needed to ask. "Do you want to be free?" he queried the bird, and the Quig nodded yes, so he knew it had heard. With one hand Tobias then threw wide the panes, and opened the cage with the hand that remained. His stilts fell away, and he fell to the ground, with a crash and a bang, and a terrible sound. And so the Quig's freedom, and what it brought round. Isn't a happy Quig? So happy he's crying tears of joy. The Quig stretches wings. The Quig stretches wings and shot through the air, from his old home the cage to the tree over there. He was long out of practice and stiffened by years. The joy flooded up from his heart through his tears. Life among branches was as it should be. He feasted his eyes on the bounteous tree. Leafy green ceilings with rumplenut walls, with rumplenuts lining along rumplenut halls. Instinct took over. That happens with birds. No order, no questions, no lessons, no words. One by one in his beak he gathered up nuts, and did what he knew he should do in his guts. He would eat one for strength, then with purposeful eyes, he would fly one nut out past the wall down the rise. The Quig knew inside how to sow, as I've said, like a farmer at dawn when he rolls out of bed, and roves up and down in the field past the wall. He planted till dawn, then he let out a call for assistance, one urgent and true, and somehow Tobias knew just what to do. The Quigs were completed, new work had begun. Tend to the nuts till they sprouted toward the sun. And so grew an orchard from where there was none. The years turned like pages, Tobias grew tall. So did the trees, but the Quig he stayed small. Together they prospered, the bird and the man, and the trees that formed nuts had grown up from the land. Then slowly in numbers more Quigs found their way, from gold cages elsewhere, from lives colored gray. Quigs nested, Quigs hatched, so many so new. Tobias got married and raised children too. They now climb those trees, as Tobias had done, imagining galleons inside every one. And so stories pass from the old to the young. What a beautiful, beautiful Rumplenut tree forest. Plant the seeds and the forest will grow. Loves you all.